Damage Over Time, a Painbound LitRPG story. By FirstBite. A gifted young member of the esteemed Arashi family encounters a devastating downfall after employing a skill granted to him. Once cherished as a valuable asset to his family, he now faces ostracization and scorn from those he once considered close. On the brink of demise, with his health dwindling to zero, he is enveloped in a mysterious event that suggests the possibility of a fresh start. This fantasy story delves into the resilience in adversity, the relentless quest for power, and the hope given by his second opportunity. What to expect? Chapter length: each chapter will be between 1,500 to 2,000 words. Genre focus: expect a combat and progression-heavy lit RPG. Note that this may not be immediately evident in the first few chapters. Visual style: from the very first chapter, enjoy the unique charm of 2D pixel art. Character development: the main character, MC, doesn't start off strong but will gradually grow into their abilities and discover its true potential. Genres are lit RPG, time loop, progression, martial arts, male lead, action, adventure, fantasy, time travel. Warning: this fiction contains graphic violence. Chapter 1: Arashi. 010/100 HP. Is this the end? It appears they've abandoned me. To be honest, I can't blame them. I stopped believing in myself a long time ago, and I'm surprised they kept trying to help me for so long. Let's face it. I need to stop kidding myself. Why do I keep hoping for the best when I know what the Arashi family is really like? They didn't keep me around to help me get better, but to use me as a test subject, to stop things like my situation from happening again. To this day, I still struggle to understand how things went so horribly wrong. I was once seen as the next big genius, and I did everything I could to make my family proud. But all of it fell apart just when it should have marked the beginning of my success. Instead, it marked the end of everything. 009/100 HP. Why did I end up with this ability? No, this isn't a blessing, it's a curse. Was my talent so immense that even God feared what I could become? What kind of deity imparts such a dreadful gift to their follower? In my family's long history, there have been no such cases. I stand as the first and only one to bear this burden. It's no wonder they've kept me alive all these years. I am the exception in our long lineage of pyromancers. They kept me here to try and stop this from happening again, always looking for a way to get rid of my disabled state, but not because they care about me. They're doing it for their own good. Although it seems they've reached a stalemate with no progress, given that they are not here to offer a healing potion to restore my health to full. I guess I've used up a lot of their resources. Maybe they can't afford to experiment on me. System window open. Just 8 health points left before it's all over. You'd think a member of the Arashi family would meet their end in the tower, not in their own room, with no one around, not even attendants or doctors. But here I am, alone in my dark room, nobody else in sight. Every time I look at my status window, I can't help but laugh a little inside. If I'd known the skill I was going to get, I might have chosen a different path. Maybe it's this passive skill we Arashis get that's made things so bad for me. Or is it the active skill itself causing all my troubles, even without the extra effect of the passive ability? 007/100 HP. Skill window open. Magic amplifications information. Perhaps it's due to the increase in magic damage from the passive skill that my situation has become so dire. Had I known that the skill bestowed upon me by God would be such a curse, I wouldn't have trained so hard to increase my intelligence stat to 10. If only I had known, maybe I would have taken a different route. Such an amazing passive skill has ended up being my downfall. But really, what choice did I have? The Arashi family, famous for their line of pyromancers, built their reputation and influence on their skill with fire magic. In our family, every kid is born to be a pyromancer and has to go through tough training to get our first passive skill before our coming-of-age ceremony. That's when God gives us our first active skill. Everyone sees it as a blessing, but to me, it's always felt like a curse. 006/100 HP. Before everything went wrong, I was seen as a child prodigy, a talent worth developing. I was the first in my generation to hit 10 points in intelligence stats, the requirement to unlock the magic amplification passive skill. You see, when the first attribute between strength, vitality, intelligence, and dexterity reaches 10 points, it grants a corresponding passive skill. This is precisely why the Arashi family emphasizes the development of their children's intelligence stats, aiming to cultivate this unique passive skill. However, in comparison to my siblings within the family, I had pushed myself to reach an impressive 15 points of intelligence through dedication and rigorous discipline. This accomplishment made me one of the few to participate in the coming-of-age ceremony with stats far beyond the recommended amount. 005/100 HP. Could it be that this was also my mistake? Allowing my intelligence stats to soar so high also amplified my magical power output. If I had kept it at 10, perhaps the damage wouldn't be so irreparable. Every time I reflect on it, my talent and dedication appear to be the root of all the misfortune if we forget the skill itself. Although, I suppose it no longer matters. I've long been abandoned, with no true ally except Mother. I hope to reunite with her in whatever lies beyond. Oh, Mother, you should have led a life filled with happiness, but because of me, and the stress I caused you, you had to depart at such a tender age. I'm deeply sorry. 004/100 HP. Status window open. Self-immolation's information. This cursed skill, it's what ruined my life. If only I'd known the terrible consequences of using it, I would have never dared. Self-immolation, just as it sounds. It's a skill that sets the user's body on fire. In just 1 second, my veins, bones, flesh, and skin were scorched beyond recognition. A lifetime of pain and disability, all for a minuscule 0.001% increase in proficiency. Ridiculous, isn't it? A self-harming skill, but for what purpose? The skill's description only mentioned its drawbacks. It didn't seem to offer any real benefit. It was supposed to take 2% of my health every second, but that was far from the truth. The effect was massively increased because of the magic amplification passive skill and the added effects of my high intelligence stats. Just 1 second using this skill left me paralyzed. My veins disintegrated instantly, my bones melted from the heat, my flesh turned to ash, and my skin charred completely. They tried everything to keep me alive, but I wished they hadn't, as I was left useless for years. Unable to move or change my fate. Even after the skill was disabled, my body was beyond repair, constantly having my life force drained. The family had to use expensive healing potions to treat my wounds, only to leave me hanging on by my last few health points. 003/100 HP. My dear mother, she did everything she could to heal me. But my father, he didn't care, didn't even visit once to check on my progress. My mother was shunned by the entire family because of her desperate pleas for support and help for my condition. This put her under unbelievable stress, and sadly, it eventually took her life. I was left alone, confined to my room, a reminder of a failed prodigy whom was once celebrated. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years, with only the occasional visit from a servant who'd bring me my meals and the necessary potions to keep me clinging to life. 002/100 HP. As time passed, I began to reflect on my situation. Trapped in a body that no longer served me, I started to see my room as a prison rather than a sanctuary. The once prestigious Arashi name now felt like a heavy chain around my neck. The family, renowned for their prowess and influence, seemed indifferent to my plight. It was as if I had become a ghost, haunting the corridors of my ancestral home, forgotten by those who once praised my potential. 001/100 HP. A thought often lingered in my mind, if only I was given another chance. 000/100 HP. As my health dropped to 0, the world around me started to blur and shift. The walls of my room, once so familiar, began to twist into shapes I couldn't recognize. It felt like the end, my journey drawing to a close with my health meter exhausted. But in that final moment, something extraordinary happened. Time seemed to unravel around me. My life flashed before my eyes, my childhood, my days as a prodigy, and the tragic turn that led me here. I felt weightless, as if lifted from the physical pains and constraints of my existence. The suffering, regret, and loneliness began to fade away, replaced by a strange, calming sensation. I felt something pulling me beyond the limits of my current reality. The darkness that had been closing in was now receding, giving way to a soft, glowing light. Young master, it's time to wake up. Huh? Chapter 2, The Unfamiliar Familiar. Huh? I murmured, my voice tinged with confusion. Abruptly, the sensation of being dragged through an endless void of darkness was replaced by a voice, familiar, yet one I hadn't heard in ages. My eyes struggled to open, squinting against the light that now slowly flooded the room. Young Master Kyan, wake up. It's morning, the voice called again, its insistence wrapped in a tone of gentle care. It sounded like the maiden who had looked after me since my youth. Suddenly, a burst of sunlight filled the room as she drew back the blinds, banishing the shadows. As my vision cleared, I realized I was still in the bleak, solitary room that had been my prison. However, something felt different about it. Instead, I found myself in a space radiating warmth and light. The surroundings felt different, oddly comforting at that. My heart pounded with uncertainty. I initially thought they had somehow revived me, perhaps using a health potion just as my health points dwindled to nothing. But something wasn't right. The room was cleaner and more organized than I remembered. There were no empty health bottles scattered on the floor, no neglected cloths from maids who had left me unattended. Instead, the room was fragrant with lavender, a stark contrast to the constant scent of charred skin that used to cling to it. It doesn't hurt? Sitting up, I felt an energy and vitality I hadn't experienced in years. The pain, the scars, the debilitating weakness that had been my constant companions, all had vanished overnight. I looked around, half expecting everything to revert to the dismal chamber that had encapsulated my suffering. This must be some kind of dream. This can't be real. Is this some final kindness from God before passing to the other side? I was still grappling with this surreal shift in reality when the woman's voice reached me again. Young Master Kyan, how many times must I call you? Today is the first day of your training. You asked me to wake you early to prepare, and here you are, still lounging in bed. As I stared at the woman standing before me, disbelief washed over me. Elora? She was the maid, a lady in her 40s, who had been a constant presence throughout my childhood, assisting my mother in caring for me. Time seemed to have left her untouched. She stood there as if the years had not worn her down at all. It was as if she had always been by my side, never having left. But I knew all too well that this couldn't be. She had retired from her position as a maid long ago. How could she be here, looking just as she did in those days? Her familiar, caring gaze and the gentle smile that had always brought me comfort were exactly as I remembered. It was almost as if time had rewound, bringing me back to an era that I thought had long passed. Still in disbelief, I managed a weak smile. You look just the same, still so kind," I said, with a mix of wonder and confusion. She chuckled softly, a sound that brought back a flood of memories. "Oh, young master, you always had a way with words. But let's not dally any longer. You have a busy day ahead. I'll get your clothes ready, so go and wash up." Watching her tidy up the room so easily, I tried to make sense of what was happening. Her being there was comforting, but I was also really confused. I swung my legs off the bed and my feet hit the cool floor. This feeling surprised me. I hadn't felt anything like this in a long time. My damaged veins had taken away my sense of touch, leaving me with only pain. But now, I felt no pain, just the cool floor under my feet. It all felt so real. Could this really be just a dream? I made my way to the washroom, still trying to grasp the surreal nature of my situation. The washroom was polished with stone tiles lining the floor, and the walls were adorned with intricate mosaics designs, casting a warm glow across the room from the oil lamps. I approached the basin, a beautifully crafted piece of porcelain, and turned the brass tap. Cool water flowed over my hands. It was then that I caught my reflection in the polished bronze mirror hanging above the basin. This. The shock of what I saw rendered me speechless. Staring back at me was not the broken, scarred figure I had become accustomed to, but a much younger version of myself. My skin was smooth, free of the wounds that had marked my body, and my eyes held a vibrancy that had long been extinguished. I looked to be about 14 years old, the age when I was at the peak of my potential, before everything went awry. How? This has to be a dream. A whirlwind of emotions swept through me. If this was a dream, it had taken me back to the best moment of my life, a time of promise and hope before my downfall. But another thought slowly crept into my mind. What if this wasn't a dream? What if, somehow, I had been regressed back in time? I touched my face, half expecting my hand to pass through a mirage, but the reflection remained solid and real. My heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was either an incredibly vivid dream or a miraculous second chance, a chance to change my destiny and avoid the pitfalls that had led to my ruin. I splashed water on my face, each drop feeling like a touch of reality, anchoring me in this bewildering situation. But there was one definitive way to test the authenticity of this experience, something that could confirm whether I was truly back in time or caught in a dream. Taking a deep breath, I focused and uttered the words that had become second nature to me: system window. Open. I waited, my heart pounding in anticipation. If this was indeed the past, the system window, a hallmark of my previous lives, would appear with different information, confirming the impossible. If not, its absence of change would signify that I was merely lost in a vivid dream, a fantasy conjured by a longing mind. The familiar translucent screen materialized. There it was, the system window, just as I remembered it, a floating display showing my stats, skills, and inventory, all the intricate details of my prowess or what it could be. I stared at the system window, a mix of disbelief and realization washing over me. This wasn't a dream. Against all logic and reason, I had been granted the unimaginable, a chance to relive my life, to turn back the clock to a moment when my potential was still raw and my fate not yet sealed. The key to this realization lay in the numbers displayed on the screen. My attributes had reset to the levels they were before my training and, crucially, before the coming-of-age ceremony where I received that cursed skill. My stats were those of a younger, untrained version of myself, a clear sign that I was indeed back in time. Ha, 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 ha. My laughter echoed off the washroom walls, a sound tinged with disbelief and a laugh that shattered the chains of a doomed fate. As I stood there, the weight of the revelation still settling in, a thrilling sense of liberation surged through me. I was no longer a prisoner of my past mistakes. With the knowledge of what had transpired in my previous life, I now had the power to steer my destiny in a new direction. The errors that had led to my ruin could be rectified, and the tragedies that befell my mother and me could be averted. As I turned off the tap, the last droplets of water felt like the closing of an old chapter and the beginning of a new one. As I walked away from the washroom, the memories of my deathbed contemplations flooded back. During those final, agonizing moments, I had endlessly pondered the countless ways I could have averted my fate. Now, granted a second chance, I was determined to put those reflections into action. I knew exactly what needed to be done to not just survive, but to thrive. Yet, I also understood the consequences of deviating from the set path. The Arashi family, bound by tradition and a rigid sense of honor, would undoubtedly ostracize me for choosing a different route. But the thought didn't faze me. I had already experienced their love, a superficial affection that crumbled when I was most in need. Why should I concern myself with their opinions now? Their love had been a facade, one that vanished at my most vulnerable hour. So, who was I to care about their judgment or approval? If defying the family's traditions meant preserving my life and avoiding the horrors of my past, then so be it. I would happily challenge the conventions of the Arashi family. The thought of their disapproval, which once might have terrified me, now seemed insignificant compared to the chance to rewrite my story. I was no longer the obedient son, bound by the expectations of lineage. I was a survivor, armed with the knowledge of a painful future and the will to change it. This time, I will not walk the same treacherous path. Chapter 3: Simple Attire, Complex Intentions. Elora, ever attentive, had laid out my clothes on the bed before stepping outside, leaving me to change in privacy. I glanced at the attire she had chosen, a sense of irony tugging at the corner of my lips. The outfit was nothing short of luxurious, the kind reserved for scholarly pursuits. It consisted of a richly embroidered tunic, the fabric a deep, crimson red that shimmered in the light. Intricate patterns of flames, symbolic of our family's heritage and status, adorned the cuffs and hem, while the trousers were of a matching hue, perfectly tailored to demonstrate elegance and prestige. Even the shoes were polished to a mirror-like sheen, completing the image of a young noble poised for greatness. This clothing was specially tailored for children entering the training. Since the focus of the training was on enhancing the intelligence stat within the Asher's family, a pursuit more intellectual than physical, there was no need for attire suited to rigorous movement. Hence, they chose to equip us with these extravagant outfits. The purpose was more than mere fashion, it was a strategic choice. These clothes were designed to project a certain image to other clans, a display of sophistication that came with being a member of the Arashi family. Such attire was a subtle yet powerful statement of our family's commitment to excellence. In my past life, I would have donned this outfit without a second thought, eager to project an image of influence and potential, especially given my young age. It was a way to command respect and attention in a world where adults often overlook the young. But now, with different priorities and a clear understanding of what truly mattered, I scoffed lightly at the thought of wearing such attire. It represented a path I was no longer interested in pursuing. Turning to my wardrobe, I sifted through the clothes until I found what I was looking for: simple, unassuming garments. I selected a pair of plain gray pants and a basic white shirt, the kind of clothes worn by the lower class for their everyday tasks. They were comfortable, practical, and most importantly, they were a statement. By choosing these clothes, I was rejecting the expectations of my family and the rigid traditions that had once dictated my every move. I also need these clothes because those fancy cloths won't withstand the rigorous training I'm planning to put myself through. Dressing quickly, I felt a sense of liberation. I was no longer the prodigy bound by the chains of expectation. I was Kyan, a person determined to carve his own path, regardless of familial expectations. Once dressed, I stepped out of my room. I was keenly aware of the surprised glance Elora gave me as she glanced at my attire, but it didn't matter. "Why, young master, what happened to the clothes I laid out for you?" Elora asked, her voice laced with surprise and confusion. "I left them there. Today's the first day of training, and those impractical clothes would only get in the way of my movements," I replied, adjusting the simple shirt I had chosen. "But, movement? Why would you care?" Elora started, her brows furrowed in concern. "Let's head to the main hall, shall we? We wouldn't want to be late and cause a stir," I interjected, cutting her off. I knew Elora was uncomfortable with me presenting myself in such modest attire, but there were more pressing issues at hand. Between making a fashion statement and punctuality, the latter was certainly her greater concern. I steered us towards the main hall, ready to confront the start of a new path. As we made our way to the main hall, the grandeur of the Arashi family estate was on full display. The corridors were adorned with lavish decorations. The walls were lined with an array of paintings, each capturing or depicting a moment of our family's history. The floor was covered with plush red carpets that muffled my footsteps, leading me through the hallway. Maids moved quietly along the corridor, their attention dedicated to preserving the pristine condition of the estate. They meticulously cleaned the luxurious vases and dusted the frames that adorned the walls. Their movements were graceful and efficient. As I stepped into the main hall, the scene that unfolded before me was of bustling activity. The hall itself was of architectural beauty. Towering ceilings adorned with intricate designs. Enormous chandeliers, dripping with crystals, cast a warm, golden light over the crowd. The floor was a polished marble mosaic, reflecting the beautiful ceiling. The hall was teeming with people. Every corner was filled with adults from both the main and branch families. It was a gathering of significance, as many were parents of the children about to embark on the rigorous training program. The air was thick with anticipation and the murmur of countless conversations. In my first life, I remember being overwhelmed by this scene. As a nervous and immature teenager, the weight of expectations and the scrutiny of so many eyes had been almost suffocating. But now, as I walked through the hall, my perspective had drastically changed. I felt a sense of detachment. These people, of whom I recognized less than a few %, held no power over me. As I made my way through the crowd, I could feel the gazes of the adults upon me. Their mocking whispers and muffled laughter were undoubtedly about my plain clothing. Look at that one, in such plain clothes. Does the Arashi family now dress their children in commoner's attire? One woman sneered, her voice dripping with mockery. Perhaps they've fallen on hard times, another man joked, eliciting a round of chuckles from those nearby. And here I thought the Arashi main family prided themselves on excellence. Seems like they've lowered their standards, a man quipped, eyeing me with a smirk. Their words, meant to belittle and mock, floated around me, but I remained unfazed. The disdain and ridicule that once would have cut deep now seemed inconsequential. I had a plan, a clear path forward, and the shallow judgments of these people were mere background noises. Cayenne. This voice. At the sound of that familiar voice, I whipped my head around so quickly it felt like I could have snapped a bone. There she was, my mother. She moved towards me with a grace that seemed to defy her physical capabilities, her elegant clothing flowing around her like water. She was the epitome beauty. Her hair was styled impeccably, each strand perfectly in place, and her face bore a gentle, yet striking, makeup that highlighted her natural beauty. Cayenne. Mother. As she closed the distance between us, I braced myself for a warm, maternal embrace, a moment I had pictured in my mind countless times. But what happened next was far from the tender reunion I had envisioned. Just as she reached me, instead of wrapping me in a hug, her hand swiftly came up and thumped me on the head. The surprise of it left me momentarily stunned. Agar. What was that for? Cayenne, what on earth are you wearing? She exclaimed, her tone a blend of disbelief and exasperation. You're at a formal gathering, not some backstreet play. I rubbed the spot where she had hit me, a sheepish grin spreading across my face. This was my mother in her truest form, straightforward, no nonsense, and unapologetically herself. Despite the initial shock, a chuckle escaped me. I had almost forgotten how direct she could be, especially when it came to matters of family image, or was it perhaps my image that she was worried most, rather than the family's? Sorry, Mother, I thought I'd try something different today. I replied, trying to sound as earnest as possible despite the humor of the situation. Different is an understatement, she retorted, but I could see the corners of her mouth twitching, trying to suppress a smile. Well, at least you made it in time. As she inspected me from head to toe, her demeanor softened, and I could see the relief in her eyes. She was just happy to see me, even if her way of showing it was a little unconventional. As I stood there, looking at my beloved mother, a wave of emotions threatened to overwhelm me. I longed to just break down and embrace her, to relive the affection and warmth that I had missed so dearly. Suddenly, my mother's eyes widened as she glanced towards the grand clock in the hall. Oh! It's about to start. Cayenne, you idiot, go to the stadium before you get in trouble, she exclaimed, her voice laced with urgency. Her words snapped me back to reality. This was neither the time nor the place for emotional reunions. There was a schedule to adhere to, and the Arashi family was nothing if not punctual in their proceedings. I nodded quickly, feeling a mix of regret and resolve. Right, I'm on my way, I responded, turning to leave. As I started to walk away, I paused and turned back to give my mother one last meaningful look. "Things will be different this time," I said, a firm conviction in my voice. "What?" My mother's expression shifted to one of puzzlement. She glanced at Elora, who was standing beside her, equally confused. Elora simply shrugged, her expression mirroring my mother's. "What is that idiot even saying?" my mother muttered, though I could detect a hint of curiosity in her tone. I couldn't help but smile slightly as I continued on my way. They couldn't possibly understand the weight of those words, not yet. Making my way towards the stage, I could feel the weight of numerous gazes upon me. The area was bustling with children my age, far too many to count, each one here to embark on the same training. These were my siblings from various mothers and cousins from different branches of the family tree. The scene was a direct consequence of my father's belief in natalism, his desire to expand the family lineage far and wide. If only my father had not been so committed to this philosophy, there wouldn't be so many of us here, each child chasing after an approval that felt increasingly futile. This realization brought a sense of irony. Here we all were, a multitude of offspring born from the same ambition, yet for many of us, our aspirations and efforts would be in vain in the eyes of our shared father/idol. "Hey, look at that one," snickered a boy with a haughty expression, pointing in my direction. "Did he get lost on his way to the market?" Another, a girl with an air of superiority, chimed in, "Or maybe he's here to clean the stage, not stand on it." A group of children nearby erupted in laughter. "Doesn't he know this is a prestigious event? You can't just show up dressed like a commoner," another girl remarked, her voice dripping with disdain. I let out a sigh, not of defeat but of indifference, and continued my walk, deliberately ignoring the children's mocking remarks. My nonchalant response seemed to irk them more than any words I could have said. Their laughter and jeers gradually faded into one of annoyance. However, their attention, and mine, was abruptly diverted by a booming announcement that resonated through the hall. A spokesperson's voice, clear and authoritative, captured the attention of every attendee. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the Arashi family, please direct your attention to the arrival of Lord Arashi Kazuhiko, the head of our esteemed house." A hushed reverence fell over the crowd. The petty squabbles and mocking ceased instantaneously, replaced by an air of anticipation and respect. All eyes turned towards the grand entrance and arrival of the patriarch of the Arashi family. As Lord Kazuhiko's arrival was announced, a noticeable change swept through the hall. The air seemed to grow heavier, almost stifling. It felt hotter, as though an invisible tension was being manifested physically. Breathing became a bit more laborious, each inhalation feeling thicker than the last. The grand chandeliers seemed to radiate more heat than light, contributing to the growing discomfort. The crowd's nervous energy, mixed with the warm air, created an almost palpable pressure in the room. And finally, the grand doors at the entrance creaked open. As he stepped into the room, every eye was fixed upon him. His entry was an undeniable presence of his authority. Father. Chapter 4. Lord Kazuhiko. Tall and imposing, Father moved with a dignified grace that belied his age. His hair, a rich shade of charcoal black with streaks of fiery red, flowed down his back, reminiscent of flames licking the air. His eyes, sharp and penetrating, glowed with an intensity that spoke of a life dedicated to mastering the arts of fire. They flickered with the wisdom and experience of years spent harnessing the elemental powers of flame. He was garbed in a robe that seemed to be crafted from the very fires of the earth. The fabric was a deep, burning crimson, interwoven with threads of gold that shimmered like embers in the hall's light. The robe moved around him like a living entity. Intricate patterns of flames and dragons adorned the edges. Standing there looking at Lord Kazuhiko, it felt like looking at a stranger who happened to share the same living space. This man, my father, he never really paid interest in those he did not consider worthy of his attention. As a dedicated natalist, he was a firm advocate for the expansive growth of his lineage, driven by a belief that to ascend to the pinnacle of influence in a world governed by power, he needed to birth as many potentially useful heirs as possible. Yet, Until he discerned a specific utility in an individual, he would not acknowledge them as his own, regardless of their shared blood. His approach towards fatherhood was pragmatic, viewing his children more as potential assets to be cultivated and used rather than individuals to be nurtured and loved. In his eyes, we were either tools to further the family's prestige and power or inconsequential entities unworthy of his time and attention. He was feared as a man of overwhelming power, a master pyromancer whose flames were often described by those who had witnessed them as hellfire itself. His reputation preceded him, providing him the nickname of Azura. As Lord Kazuhiko made his way towards the centerpiece, the atmosphere was charged with apprehension. He moved with a sense of purpose, his eyes scanning the crowd yet seemingly indifferent to the sea of young faces eagerly awaiting his acknowledgement. Most of the children, including myself, expected nothing more than a passing glance, if that. The same that happened in my first try. However, as he continued his walk, something unexpected happened. His gaze, which had been sweeping over the crowd indifferently, suddenly sharpened as it fell upon one child in particular, me. The room seemed to hold its breath as he altered his path, heading directly towards where I stood. Around me, the other children shuffled nervously, their earlier mockery turning into a sort of gleeful anticipation of a reprimand. The adults seated in their chairs watched with a mix of curiosity and mocking amusement just the same, fully expecting a scolding to unfold because of my attire. In the periphery of my vision, I could see my mother standing up, her hand moving unconsciously to her mouth, biting at her nails in a display of nervousness. The fear of what might transpire was evident in her eyes, reflecting the tension that gripped the entire room. The patriarch stood before me, his gaze intense and unreadable. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. I held his gaze steadily, an unspoken challenge hanging in the air between us. There was no fear or anxiety in my eyes, only a calm, unwavering resolve. As the seconds stretched on in silence, something unexpected happened. A flicker of spark, seemingly out of nowhere, ignited around the fabric of my simple clothes. In mere moments, my attire was engulfed in flames. The crowd gasped in shock at the sudden eruption of fire. "My God, he's on fire!" exclaimed a woman from the crowd, her voice laced with shock. My mother, witnessing her son enveloped in flames, let out a scream of terror. Kyan. Elora, quick to act, grabbed my mother's arm, trying to calm her. "Please, ma'am, you mustn't. It's dangerous to intervene," she urged. "But he's burning." "My child," my mother cried out, struggling against Elora's grip, her eyes fixed on me with a horror. In the midst of the tumult, a man's voice rose above the rest, tinged with a mix of awe and curiosity. "Look! He isn't screaming. How is he enduring that?" Everyone around expected screams of agony, but there was only silence. The quiet was unsettling. I stood my ground, not moving an inch from where I stood, as my clothes disintegrated into ash, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. A few flames still licked my skin, causing burns, but I made no sound of distress. This was not an attempt on my life. The fire, while painful, was not debilitating, a far cry from the excruciating agony I had experienced that fateful day in my past life. It was clear that he, in his own harsh, unorthodox way, was imparting a lesson rather than seeking to cause irreparable harm. Despite the burns, the public humiliation, and the painful exposure, my gaze remained locked. We stood there, frozen in that single moment. The patriarch's demeanor was as stoic as ever, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. After what felt like an eternity, but was only a few seconds, he turned away nonchalantly, as if the event of a child being engulfed in flames right before his eyes was merely a trivial occurrence. There I was, left naked and scorched in front of the assembled crowd, yet he simply moved on as if nothing had happened. Without missing a beat, Lord Kazuhiko began the day's announcement, his voice resonating through the hall, commanding and composed. For centuries, the Arashi family has been renowned as a lineage of exceptional pyromancer mages. Our pursuit has always been to reach the pinnacle of flame mastery, a pursuit blessed and made possible by our revered deity. It is through this divine favor that each descendant of the Arashi family is granted the ability to manifest the class of pyromancers from birth. Unlike martial artists who rely on the crude strength of their bodies, you have been bestowed with the gift to harness and manifest magic, a power that transcends mere physicality. Embrace this gift. Nurture it. Let it grow within you until you become the greatest mage you can be. You are the future of the Arashi family, the next generation to carry our flame. Rise to this challenge and make us proud. Today marks a significant milestone in the lives of our young ones. At the age of 14, it is time for them to embark on their isolated training, a tradition that the Arashi family has upheld for generations. Each child will be transported to a confined space for an entire year. In this solitude, they will be tasked with a crucial goal, to elevate their intelligence stats to a minimum of 10 before the day of their coming-of-age ceremony, which will take place immediately after their training concludes. By achieving this milestone, you will be bestowed the Magic Amplification passive skill, marking the beginning to your journey for power. During this year of seclusion, each child will be provided with a space equipped with all necessities. This includes a bedroom for rest, a bathroom for personal hygiene, and a designated area for meals. It is essential to understand that while basic needs will be met, luxury will be absent. The purpose of this training is to foster self-reliance and discipline, not comfort. There will be no servants to tend to your quarters. Maintaining the cleanliness and order of your space will be your responsibility. Meals will be provided at specific times each day. These meals are pre-made and designed to meet your nutritional needs, ensuring that you have the necessary energy and sustenance to focus on your intellectual development. This year of isolation is a crucial phase in your journey as a member of the Arashi family. Now, I wish you all the best of luck in your training. Lord Kazuhiko announced, his voice carrying a finality. With a subtle flick of his fingers, a remarkable spectacle unfolded. In an instant, flames enveloped each child present in the hall. These were not ordinary flames, they danced around us in a mesmerizing display, emitting a warmth that was more comforting than scorching. The flames, rather than causing harm, intended to transport us to our individual isolated spaces. As the flames flickered and danced, the world around me began to blur and shift. The grandeur of the hall, the faces of the spectators, and the decor all started to fade, giving way to a new environment. When the flames finally dissipated, I found myself in my own respective isolated space. The transition was seamless and flawless. The isolated space I found myself in was a modest, sparsely furnished room, but what it lacked in luxury, it more than made up for in resources for intellectual development. The walls were lined with shelves that reached the ceiling, each packed with an array of books covering a vast array of subjects. These books were the key to increasing our intelligence stats. By reading and understanding their concepts, we would be able to enhance our mental faculties, a crucial part of our training. In the center of the room was a simple desk and a chair, evidently meant to be my study area for the duration of the training. Standing in the middle of the room, still completely naked from the earlier incident. Well, I chose those clothes for easier movement, but I suppose being naked takes ease of movement to a whole new level. I chuckled to myself. The irony of my earlier attire choice wasn't lost on me. As I surveyed the room, my mind was already set on a different course. This time around, I had no intention of focusing on increasing my intelligence stat. I had a broader plan. I began to walk around the space, eyeing the extensive collection of large, heavy books. Methodically, I picked them up, assessing their weight and size, and started stacking them into two separate piles. These weren't going to be for reading, they were a part of a different kind of training I had in mind. Once I had the piles arranged to my satisfaction, I headed to the bathroom chamber. There, I took hold of the metal rod that served as a curtain holder. It was sturdy and of a decent length, perfect for what I had in mind. Returning to my book stacks, I positioned the metal rod and began the arduous task of piercing each book through the middle. It was a challenging process, requiring both strength and patience, but eventually, I managed to skewer enough books on either side of the rod. The result was a makeshift weight bar, with each side loaded with about 20 kilograms of books. Now, let the real training begin. Chapter 5: The Four Attributes. Intelligence, strength, dexterity, and vitality. These are the four cornerstone attributes that define an individual's general capabilities and direction in life. Each of these stats plays a crucial role in shaping the kind of individual one becomes. Intelligence is the stat that primarily bolsters one's magic prowess. It enhances magic damage and expands mana capacity, making it the go-to attribute for those who walk the path of the mage. The higher one's intelligence, the more potent and sustained their magical abilities become. Strength, on the other hand, is the lifeblood of martial artists and those who rely primarily on physical prowess in battle. This attribute governs overall physical damage and enhances physical defense. It's what gives warriors their formidable power in hand-to-hand combat and enables them to withstand blows that would incapacitate others. Dexterity is the attribute of agility and precision. It's vital for those who wield weapons, be it swordsmen, archers, or other weapon-based classes. An increase in dexterity translates to quicker movements, faster attacks, and enhanced proficiency with weapons. It's the art of swift, precise strikes and evasive maneuvers. Then there's vitality, often seen as the most underappreciated of the stats. Its primary function is to increase one's maximum health. While it may not seem as immediately influential or as glamorous as other attributes, it plays a crucial role, especially in critical situations. Often considered a last resort, vitality is usually the attribute that many classes choose to develop only after prioritizing others. In most cases, each class tends to focus on two main stats to achieve a balanced skill set. For instance, mages typically concentrate on intelligence for their magical prowess, while also investing some points into dexterity. This combination not only bolsters their spellcasting abilities but also grants them a certain level of speed, essential for evading dangerous situations, especially in close-quarters combat. Similarly, martial artists usually focus on strength and dexterity. Strength naturally enhances their defense capabilities, making them formidable in physical confrontations. The addition of dexterity not only improves their offensive maneuvers but also provides agility, allowing for more effective and agile combat strategies. While investing in vitality could indeed be beneficial by increasing their health pool, many martial artists find that a balance of strength and dexterity offers a more comprehensive advantage, covering both defense and offense. The most critical aspect of our training hinges on the first attribute among the four: intelligence, strength, dexterity, and vitality to reach the threshold of 10 points. Achieving this milestone awards a respective passive skill, a significant and irreversible decision. This passive skill is a one-time acquisition, permanently shaping one's abilities and future. Once chosen, there is no going back. The skill becomes a lifelong companion, for better or worse, and can even influence the effectiveness of one's active skills. I know this all too well, having experienced it firsthand. Thankfully, in this second chance at life, I am free from the constraints of my previous choices. Reaching 10 points in intelligence first grants the magic amplification ability. This passive skill is incredibly potent, enhancing one's overall magical power. Its influence extends across all forms of magic: fire, water, wind, earth, holy, darkness, and any other types, without exception. It's a universally powerful ability that can significantly amplify a mage's prowess, even at higher levels. In my past life, this very ability had been both a blessing and a curse. Its immense power came with grave consequences, a lesson I learned the hard way. If one's training and focus lead to strength being the first attribute to reach the 10-point threshold, the reward is the passive skill known as Warrior's Might. This formidable ability significantly bolsters the overall physical damage and defense capabilities of its wielder. In many ways, Warrior's Might is as beneficial as magic amplification, although it lacks the latter's versatility across various elemental types. Warrior's Might is particularly advantageous in situations that demand raw physical strength and resilience. For those who engage in close-quarters combat or rely heavily on physical prowess, this skill can be a game-changer. However, its limitation lies in its focus on physical attributes alone. In a world where many adversaries possess immunities or resistances to physical damage, the ability to manipulate elements becomes crucial. This is why Warrior's Might, while exceptionally powerful, is often considered the second best option after magic amplification, especially in a diverse combat environment. For classes other than mages, particularly those who don't rely on elemental magic, Warrior's Might is often the preferred choice. Reaching the 10-point threshold in dexterity first unlocks a passive skill known as Agile Mastery. This ability is a boon for those who rely on speed, agility, and precision. Agile Mastery enhances the user's agility and attack speed, making it an essential skill for classes that depend on quick movements and swift strikes. With Agile Mastery, the user experiences a significant improvement in their reflexes and movement efficiency. It enables them to execute attacks with greater speed and dodge incoming attacks more effectively. This skill is particularly advantageous for classes like swordsmen, archers, and other weapon-based fighters, where the ability to strike quickly and evade swiftly can mean the difference between victory and defeat. However, similar to Warrior's Might, Agile Mastery has its limitations. While it greatly improves physical agility and speed, it does not directly enhance physical strength or magical abilities. Hence, while it is a top choice for classes that prioritize speed and precision, it may not be as beneficial for those who require brute strength or magical prowess. Finally, there's Vitality, often considered the least appealing stat and passive acquisition. Reaching the 10-point threshold in Vitality first unlocks a passive skill called Enduring Vitality. Enduring Vitality significantly enhances the user's life regeneration abilities. It allows for a faster recovery from injuries, enabling the individual to regain health at a rate much quicker than normal. In prolonged battles or situations where medical aid is not readily available, this passive skill can be the key to outlasting opponents. Despite its advantages, Enduring Vitality is often deemed less glamorous compared to the immediate impact of the other passive skills. In a world where battles are often won by sheer strength, speed, or magical prowess, the subtle art of endurance is sometimes undervalued. However, for classes or individuals who find themselves in attrition battles or who serve as the steadfast anchor in a team like tankers, this skill can be invaluable. On my deathbed in my previous life, countless scenarios played through my mind, each a reflection of regret and what-ifs. I had pondered endlessly on how I could have prevented my tragic fate, and amidst the sea of possibilities, one solution stood out the most: I should not have focused so intently on increasing my intelligence stat. In that life, my intelligence peaked at a point that significantly amplified the damage incurred from my active skill, an unforeseen consequence that ultimately led to my downfall. The more I had invested in intelligence, the more destructive and uncontrollable my powers had become, turning what was meant to be a strength into a lethal flaw, including the additional effect of the passive ability that came with it. I realized that the key lay in restraint, in maintaining my intelligence at a modest level, keeping it at 5 points, enough as not to enhance the harmful effects of my active skill. Instead, the stat that I should have focused on was the one most overlooked and undervalued, Vitality, and its corresponding passive skill, Enduring Vitality. In my final moments of reflection, I understood its true worth. Enduring Vitality, with its enhanced life regeneration abilities, could have been my salvation. It would have allowed me to withstand more damage, recover faster from the self-harm of the active skill, and endure the toll and the strain it inflicted on me. In focusing solely on increasing my magical prowess, I had neglected the fundamental need to survive and endure. I chuckled softly to myself as I contemplated my unorthodox path. Well, it looks like I'm about to do something no Arashi has ever done before. My inner voice responded with a wry tone, yeah, and I'm pretty sure it won't go over well with the family when they find out. I paused, a steely determination in my eyes. But survival comes before everything else this time. My decision is final: I will be increasing my vitality instead of intelligence during that year of training. Chapter 6: A Quick Guide, Attribute Boosting. I gently ran my fingers along the spine of the improvised weight bar, lost in thought about the various methods available to increase attribute stats. Leveling up, I whispered to myself, a notion both clear and straightforward. This method was the most common way to gain attribute points. With each level up, achieved by gaining experience from defeating foes, a person was awarded 3 precious attribute points to allocate at their discretion. It was an uncomplicated, direct pathway, the primary means by which individuals augmented their core attributes. Then there were items, whether crafted from rare materials or dropped by defeated enemies. I had heard tales of legendary equipment with the power to enhance one's abilities beyond imagination. Swords that could slice through the toughest armor, robes that shielded their wearers from the deadliest spells, each piece held the potential to boost one's attributes significantly just as well. The allure was undeniable, but acquiring such items was no small feat. Many coveted these treasures, and the competition to obtain them was fierce. Lastly, there was the path of self-improvement, a path defined by discipline and persistence. Unlike the immediate benefits of leveling up or the tangible power of equipment, this method was a gradual process, requiring rigorous training and study. It was the path most people embarked on in the early stages, as it was easier to increase attribute stats when they were still low. However, as attribute points increased, this method became less effective. That's why we were compelled to undergo this year-long training, to gain an advantage in the long run. The further our stats increased, the less impactful self-learning would become, which is why most pursued leveling up. This included the Arashi family. Enhancing one's intelligence attribute was intricately tied to the active practice of magic. Every individual possessed a mana pool, as indicated in the status window, even without specific active magical skills. The abundance of books scattered throughout the space served as both tools and methods for manifesting this mana into existence, regardless of possessing active magical skills. The process of accumulating intelligence points went beyond mere absorption of knowledge from reading these books. It involved actively utilizing and depleting one's mana pool through experimentation with various methods of mana manipulation. In my previous life, I followed a systematic approach to developing my magical abilities. It began with simple exercises, such as using mana to levitate objects, and progressed to more complex tasks like moving them with increasing speed and managing multiple objects simultaneously. I recall how the complexity of these tasks grew alongside my rising intelligence stats. I transitioned from manipulating a single object to handling 2, then 3, and eventually 4 objects concurrently. This progression not only tested my magical prowess, but also provided a strategic means to continually expand my intelligence attribute. While this approach was my personal method for increasing intelligence, I remained uncertain about how others achieved theirs. Each individual's likely had their unique approach or set of exercises to harness and expand their mana, thus increasing their intelligence stat in their distinctive way. Strength attribute primarily involved the practical application of martial movements and techniques. Unlike intelligence, which relied on the practice of magic, the path to boosting strength was grounded in martial discipline. This was often considered the path of martial artists or those who relied on their physical prowess for combat. To enhance strength, one had to engage in rigorous, repetitive movements. These activities ranged from repetitive kicks and punches to more complex movements designed for self-defense. Usually those whom wished to increase their stats would engage in sparring matches or combat scenarios with training partners. These exercises provided practical experience and forced the body to adapt itself. Dexterity, the attribute associated with agility and quick reflexes, had a straightforward method for improvement, pushing one's stamina to the limits. Many individuals pursuing dexterity engaged in demanding activities such as running through rugged terrain, climbing mountains, or participating in intense cardiac exercises. The key was to challenge the body's stamina and push it to the point where the heart pumped vigorously, forcing the body to adapt and increase one's blood flow and lung capacity. Like other attributes, the difficulty of gaining dexterity points increased as the total number of points accumulated in that attribute grew. In other words, the more agile and reflexive one became, the harder it became to further enhance these qualities. Vitality had a unique method of improvement, inflicting continuous damage to one's own body. The concept behind increasing vitality was closely linked to the practice of bodybuilding. Individuals engaging in this method focused on lifting heavy weights in various forms and exercises. These activities caused muscle tears, which, despite not being physically painful, were considered a form of bodily damage. The flexibility of this method made it relatively easy to implement. One could damage their body by using lower weights with numerous repetitions, or by increasing the weight to an amount they could barely lift, resulting in fewer repetitions. If their vitality stat was exceptionally high and neither of these methods provided a challenge, some individuals resorted to extreme measures. There were accounts of people inflicting pain on themselves by cutting through their own flesh and skin repeatedly to intensify the damage inflicted, creating a more potent method for increasing their vitality. However, such extreme measures were not common due to the sheer difficulty and agony involved. Most individuals preferred less painful methods to enhance their vitality, even if it meant a slower progress. Most people who lack the understanding of the world might be wondering why more individuals don't choose to increase their vitality if it's relatively easy to do so. It's important to clarify that many do engage in vitality training, even mages. However, most individuals avoid starting with vitality as their primary focus, primarily to avoid gaining the unique passive ability that comes with reaching the 10-point threshold. But make no mistake, once people acquire the desired passive ability from their chosen attribute, they often turn to bodybuilding exercises to boost their vitality. However, many eventually halt their efforts upon encountering a significant plateau in their vitality growth. This is because they understand that further improvements in vitality would require them to inflict real physical damage on themselves, which is a daunting prospect. I took a deep breath and prepared to begin my training. Placing the makeshift weight bar on my shoulders, I positioned myself on the study desk, using it as an improvised bench. With determination in my eyes, I started lifting the weight. It was heavy, but not too heavy for me to manage. The cool, dry air of the isolated space surrounded me as I continued with my repetitions. With each upward heave sent a wave of tension through my muscles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, come on, and 9. Sweat beaded on my skin, glistening under the dim light, my heart thumping louder with every exertion. I continued the repetitions, my muscles straining with each lift. Sweat dripped down my forehead as I pushed myself harder. Just a bit more, push through. I gasped, my voice strained but resolute. I adjusted the weight bar on my shoulders, taking another deep, steadying breath. The study desk, now repurposed as a makeshift bench, creaked slightly under my weight. Maybe adding more books to the bar next time. I pondered aloud, already strategizing ways to intensify my training. As I set down the weight bar, panting, the reality hit me. It was going to be a relentless cycle of pushing the boundaries of my body, a daily battle against my own limitations. I'll try different exercises, maybe use the environment here to create more resistance. I thought aloud, trying to figure out the lacking part of my body that needed focus. I had a long year ahead of me, filled with physical exertion and self-inflicted pain. But I was prepared to endure it all for the sake of my survival and the chance to rewrite my destiny. Chapter 7: The Passing Training. Come on, one more push. Akkad. Breathing out heavily, I set the barbell down on the floor, taking a quick break in the middle of my tough workout. It's been a week since I started this intense routine, and I'm already noticing my body getting better. My day is pretty structured, tough upper body exercises in the morning, followed by a tough lower body workout in the afternoon. I use the evenings to chill out and let my body rest up for the next day's training. During my morning workouts, I zero in on strengthening my chest, back, shoulders, and biceps. The afternoons are all about powering through leg-focused exercises, targeting my thighs, quads, and abs, while also sneaking in some triceps work. My approach to these workouts is a bit unconventional. I use a gradual weight decrease strategy. Most people increase the weight as they get stronger, but I start heavy and then go lighter. It might sound weird, but it's really about building endurance and control. I think of it like a warrior in a fight. A warrior starting a battle with their heaviest armor and heaviest weapons. As the fight rages on, they shed their load, becoming more agile and swift. Similarly, in my training, I start with the heaviest weight, pushing my body to its limits. This initial challenge is crucial. It's where I build raw bodily fortitude. For example, in a chest workout, I might begin with a 50 kilograms lift for the first set. In the next set, I'll drop the weight to 40 kilograms, adding a few extra reps to maintain intensity. Then, I'll go down to 30 kilograms, and so on. My muscles, already fatigued from the heavy lifting, have to work differently. This shift forces them to adapt, improving my muscle endurance and make the tearing of muscles more significant. It's not just about lifting, it's about sustaining the effort over a longer period. Plus, this method is safer. By the time I'm on lighter weights, my muscles are warmed up and more flexible. This lets me do more reps with good form, which is key for building muscle and avoiding injuries. It's about pushing yourself, but also knowing when to back off a bit to let the muscles you've worked on heal and grow. Despite my approach, I couldn't help but be surprised that I hadn't seen a single increase in my vitality attribute since I started this training regimen. I had been diligently following my routine and pushing my body to its limits, but it seemed like my efforts weren't bearing fruit in the form of attribute points. I shrugged off the disappointment and decided to focus on my workout. Maybe the increase in vitality was just taking longer than I expected. I grabbed the weight bar once more and started my next set of reps, determined to give it my all. As I lifted the weights and felt the strain in my muscles, a sudden surge of energy coursed through my body. It was as if a hidden reserve of strength had been unlocked. I could feel my body responding to the intense training, and it wasn't just in my muscles, it was a deep, internal feeling of endurance. You have gone past your body's limit. You have gained 1 vitality stat. A triumphant smile spread across my face as the notification announced my vitality increase. Finally, system window open. It was a sign that my unorthodox approach was working, and I was on the right path to achieving my goal. Acknowledging the notification of my vitality stat and health increase. Now, let's keep this momentum going, I muttered to myself. My training regimen continued, and with it, my daily diet underwent a significant shift. The food that was originally intended to nourish my mind and provide the necessary nutrients for study now found itself fueling my physical training and body nourishment. I couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of how my family would react if they ever found out that I was using their carefully prepared meals and precious books for the complete opposite purpose they were intended for. Sorry, but your hard-planned meals meant for mental clarity is now being used for my muscles. I quipped to myself as I devoured a plate of food meant to enhance cognitive function. It was a comical contradiction, but I couldn't deny the results. My body was transforming, and I could see the progress I was making. The extra calories and protein from the meals were aiding in muscle recovery and growth, while the intense training sessions were pushing my physical limits. The days turned into weeks, and I remained dedicated to my relentless training regimen. I knew that to achieve my goal, I couldn't afford to become complacent. So, I diligently adjusted my workouts, adding variations, and increasing the intensity to keep my muscles guessing. It was a constant battle to push my limits and force my body to adapt. Each session brought me closer to my objective, and I could sense the changes in my physique. My muscles grew more defined, and my endurance improved. I had also gained some weight, which was a positive sign of proper development. Time passed quickly. Throughout the year, I meticulously tracked my progress, feeling my strength and endurance reaching new heights. With each passing day, I could sense a profound transformation within me. My muscles grew more defined and robust, my movements more fluid and powerful. The strategy of starting with heavy weights and gradually decreasing them proved to be remarkably effective. On the last day of my training, as I completed my final set, a surge of energy coursed through my body. I felt an overwhelming increase in my vitality stat. It was a moment of triumph, a culmination of a year's worth of relentless dedication. You have gone past your body limit. You have gained 1 vitality stat. Great, managed to snag 1 last boost in my vitality stat before training wrapped up. Any second now we should be. I trailed off, feeling the familiar sensation of being transported. Oh, there we go. Suddenly, a fiery sensation enveloped me, and in an instant, I was whisked away from my training space. Emerging from the flames, I found myself in a familiar setting, the place where the Arashi family's coming-of-age ceremony was held. The training was over, and it was time for the next phase. The Arashi family was known for its efficiency, wasting no time in transitioning from training to the ceremony where each child would acquire their active skill. As I stood there, amidst the gathered family members and branches, I couldn't help but feel out of place. My attire, provided by the training space, was ill-fitting. The clothes, designed for an average 15-year-old, struggled to contain my now massive frame, stretched and torn in places due to my muscular build. I was a stark contrast to the other children on the podium, towering over them with my newfound physical stature. The transformation I had undergone in the training space was drastic and, as I would soon realize, utterly unexpected to everyone else. As the flames dissipated, revealing me to the gathered crowd, a collective gasp rippled through the assembly. The other children, summoned at the same time as me, stared in disbelief, their eyes wide with awe and confusion as they looked at me. Among them, whispers began to circulate, their gazes fixed on my towering, muscular form that strained against the fabric of the ill-fitting clothes. "Who is that?" one of the children murmured, his voice laced with incredulity. "Is he an intruder?" another questioned, eyeing me warily. The family members, gathered for the ceremony, shared similar expressions of surprise and suspicion. None of them recognized me, the drastic change in my appearance rendering me a stranger in their midst. As I stood there, trying to comprehend the situation, I saw my mother standing there just as in disbelief as the others. I calmly and happily waved at her. Squinting her eyes as if trying to place a familiar face to my unrecognizable form, she gasped and said out loud, "Could it be Kyan?" she uttered, more to herself than to anyone else. The crowd turned to her, then back at me, their confusion slowly turning to realization. Murmurs of Kyan? And is that really him? Is it really the same dangling Arashi? Began to spread among the family members and the other children. Unaware of the nickname the dangling Arashi assigned to me following the incident on the first day of training, I stood there, taken aback by the reaction. I had been oblivious to how my initial actions had shaped the perception others had of me. Now, as I stood before them, my year of transformation had not only altered my physique but was also about to change the narrative of my existence within the Arashi family. Chapter 8: Unveiling the Transformation. As I stood on the podium, still absorbing the sea of surprised faces around me, the crowd began to stir with curiosity. My physical transformation was undeniable, a stark difference from the slender figure that had entered the training space a year ago. Among the whispers and murmurs, a question arose, echoing the doubts of many present. "Child, what exactly did you do during your training year?" rang out a familiar voice from the crowd. I immediately recognized who it was. The Arashi family, while led by the patriarch, also relies heavily on the Council of Elders. These are influential and powerful members from the various branches of the Arashi family. Even though they are not from the direct line of the Arashi main family, their leadership is pivotal in maintaining harmony among the branches, effectively reducing any chance of rebellion against the main one. This structure is crucial for the family's stability, as it ensures that the patriarch, while a central figure, does not act in self-interest. His decisions and actions are often guided and influenced by these elders. You were supposed to focus on enhancing your intelligence stats, but looking at you now, it seems like that wasn't the case. The elder continued. The question hung in the air, reflecting the skepticism in the eyes of everyone present. It was a valid concern. The Arashi family, known for valuing magical prowess, would certainly find my heavily muscled physique surprising, if not alarming, given their expected focus on intellectual development. Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself to respond to the elder's probing question. "What do you mean, sir?" Obviously, a training session is meant to allow one to train. That's exactly what I've been doing. The elder's expression shifted to one of annoyance at my response. It was clear that my answer, while truthful, was seen as evasive and unsatisfactory. The ambiguity in my words only served to reinforce his suspicion that I had neglected the training of my intelligence stat. Child, the elder said, his tone now edged with a hint of frustration. Cayenne, sir. I gently corrected. Child. The elder began again, a touch of impatience coloring his voice. It's Cayenne, sir. I reiterated calmly yet firmly. The subtle tension in my exchange with the elder was palpable. My insistence on being addressed by my name, Cayenne, was a small but firm assertion. I was determined to command a certain degree of respect. Reflecting on my past life, I realized that my fundamental mistake had been in seeking recognition for my efforts, when what I truly needed was to assert my right to respect. This time around, I was resolved to stand firm, even if it meant challenging the authority of those above me. I understood now that respect was not something to be passively hoped for, but rather something to be actively demanded, regardless of the stature or influence of the other party. My stance was clear: if respect was not given, it would be firmly, yet respectfully, requested. The elder, taken aback by my assertiveness, paused momentarily, his gaze sharpening as he assessed me. The gathered members of the Arashi family, accustomed to strict hierarchies and protocols, watched with wide eyes and hushed tones. Whispers fluttered like leaves in the wind, each carrying a hint of disbelief and surprise. Can you believe it? One spectator muttered to another. He's actually correcting an elder. To correct an elder of such high standing was unheard of. It was a gesture that defied conventions, a clear departure from the submissive posture expected of the younger generation. The crowd held its breath, the atmosphere charged with a mix of anticipation and unease. In the midst of this tense standoff, another elder's voice cut through the silence, easing the growing tension. He was a well-respected figure within the family, known for his wisdom and his ability to mediate in difficult situations. Why exactly are you so muscular, Cayenne? He asked, his tone more of curiosity than accusation. It was clear he wanted to steer the conversation. As the conversation between me and the elders unfolded, I suddenly became aware of another presence, the patriarch. Seated above the rest, he observed the proceedings from his elevated position, his eyes keenly focused on the scene below. To my surprise, the patriarch remained silent, not intervening in the exchange between me and the elders, nor raising any questions about my transformation. His gaze was fixed on me, but it wasn't filled with judgment or disapproval. Instead, there was a discernible hint of curiosity in his eyes, as if he was intrigued by the turn of events. As the tension from the elder's question still lingered in the air, I chose to keep my answer enigmatic. I believe you already know why. There's no need for me to tell you, as you will soon find out. Before anyone could further question me, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The time had come for the commencement of the coming-of-age ceremony, a pivotal moment in the life of every Arashi family member. Each year, at a precise moment, the deity granted new members of the Arashi family their own unique active skill. However, there were two crucial prerequisites for this blessing. First, the individual must possess the Pyromancer's class, a class exclusive to the Arashi family, bestowed by the deity himself. Second, the individual had to be exactly 15 years old, not a year more, not a year less. At the center of the podium where we stood was a majestic statue, a representation of the deity revered by the Arashi family. This deity was no ordinary figure. It was the embodiment of the true essence of fire, revered as the strongest magical mythical beast in existence, a dragon. Specifically, it was Ignite, the Dragon King, a being whose power and majesty were legendary among our people. As the ceremony was about to commence, the statue of Ignite, the Flame Dragon King, began to be engulfed in flames. This spectacular display signaled the start of the ritual, effectively drawing everyone's attention away from the previous conversation. The elders, including the one who had questioned me, now had their focus entirely on the ceremony. I knew this would happen, which is why I hadn't provided a detailed answer to their inquiries. But I was aware that soon, everyone would learn about my stats. A few meters from the statue, a magical device was set up. As each child crossed this device, their stats and passive skill would be displayed above them for all to see, just before they received their active skill from the deity. The first to step forward was a young girl, with a look of nervous excitement on her face. As she crossed the line marked by the magical device, her information appeared in the air above her. It showed that she had achieved the demanded 10 points in intelligence. However, her other stats like strength, agility, and vitality were all at a moderate 5 points, though this was expected. Her acquired passive skill was displayed next, magic amplification. As the young girl stepped in front of the statue, the open mouth of Ignite, the Flame Dragon King, exhaled a dramatic burst of fire. The flames, far from harmful, swirled around her in a spectacular dance, signifying the moment she was bestowed with her active skill. Above her head, a holographic display materialized, showing only the icon and name of her newly acquired skill. The crowd craned their necks to see the display. Raven Ignition. I remember her. She's the only one who had such skill. The limitations of the device meant that only the basic details of the skill were displayed, leaving out a comprehensive description. Hence, a fire-resistant dummy had been strategically placed behind the deity statue, serving a crucial role in the ceremony. An attendant, positioned next to the dummy, respectfully addressed the young girl. "Please demonstrate your active skill so that we all may see its power," he requested. The girl, still enveloped in the excitement of receiving her active skill, nodded in agreement and faced the dummy. She took a deep breath, her hands rising as she concentrated. The crowd fell into a hushed silence, their eyes fixed on her. As she channeled her magic, a surge of energy flowed from her, culminating in a spell that took form before our eyes. Flames erupted from her hands, shaping themselves into the form of a raven made entirely of fire. With an elegant flap of its wings, the fiery raven soared towards the dummy. The crowd held their breath, expecting a dramatic explosion upon impact. Instead, the raven passed through the dummy seamlessly, dissipating into the air on the other side. However, the dummy itself burst into intense flames, engulfed by the fire left in the raven's wake. The crowd erupted into applause, impressed by the skill's subtlety and effectiveness. Watching the skill in action, a memory flickered in my mind from my past life. On my deathbed, I had heard tales of a young prodigy within the family who had risen to prominence with her spectacular and powerful skill. This girl, renowned for her ability to summon majestic birds in almost infinite numbers, had captured the respect of the Arashi family. Her name was Hikari Ashira, also known within the family circles as Phoenix Caller. The skill she demonstrated today, creating a fiery raven that could ignite anything it came in contact with, was just a glimpse of her true potential. Her nickname, Phoenix Caller, was a tribute to the elegant and formidable avian forms her magic could conjure, each embodying the fierce spirit of the mythical phoenix. Hikari's fame wasn't just due to her skill's power, but also her beauty and her grace with which she known to resemble a phoenix's. As the ceremony continued, one by one, the Arashi children crossed the magical line, their stats and passive skills revealed for all to see. The air was thick with anticipation and wonder, each display of newly acquired active skills adding to the excitement of the event. The diversity of talents within the Arashi family was truly a spectacle to behold. Applause and murmurs of admiration filled the space as each child took their turn. The elders and family members watched with keen eyes, perhaps already considering how these new skills could contribute to the family. "Next," said the attendant. Finally, the moment arrived for me to step forward. This was it, my turn to reveal the culmination of my year-long training and to receive the active skill that had destroyed my path to greatness in my previous life. I took a deep breath and stepped across the line, ready to face whatever came next. The eyes of the entire Arashi family were on me, their gazes a blend of curiosity and skepticism. But I was ready. Ready to handle the outcome of my choice and ready to handle the adversity of my cursed skill. Crossing the threshold, my stats appeared overhead, a collective gasp echoed through the crowd. The numbers displayed were far from what anyone had expected. "What is this?" someone exclaimed from the crowd, their voice laced with disbelief. Murmurs spread like wildfire, each member trying to make sense of the figures hovering above me. The shock and surprise in the eyes of the family members were evident. My appearance had already set me apart, but now my stats painted a picture of a path less taken, one that defied the conventional Arashi way. Strength, 5. Intelligence, 5. Vitality, 20. Dexterity, 5. Chapter 9 Burned Bridges. Tension filled the room, echoing with the gasps and murmurs of the people present. The spectators stared at the holographic screen hovering above my head in disbelief, their eyes widening in disgust. Enduring vitality. Strength, 5. Intelligence, 5. Vitality, 20. Dexterity, 5. He really did it, one whispered in disbelief. Vitality, another exclaimed, he's forsaken the path of magic. Murmurs of dissent grew louder, and some family members began shouting accusations. He's a deviator. A forsaker. He should be quicked out. I remained calm and composed, my gaze meeting those of the enraged family members. I had expected this reaction, but I was determined to stand my ground. The patriarch of our family, Lord Kazuhiko, remained in his seat, observing the chaotic scene with a stoic expression. Silence. Lord Kazuhiko's voice boomed through the hall, cutting through the cacophony. The room fell into an uneasy hush as all eyes turned to him. The patriarch's gaze was fixed on me, and his voice was steady as he spoke. Kyan, was it? The simplicity of the question struck me, and in that moment, I couldn't help but feel a mix of both disappointment and amusement. Here was the man who should have known his own children, yet he asked me to confirm my name. That is correct, Patriarch. I responded simply. There was no need for further elaboration. To me, this man was closer to a stranger than a father, and it was a reality I had long accepted. Why did you train your vitality instead of your intelligence? His gaze piercing as he directed the question at me. In that moment, I thought to myself, contemplating the possible answers to provide. None of them would likely satisfy them. I couldn't tell them the truth that this was my second life. Even if they believed me, it could lead to unwanted experiments or scrutiny to uncover my time regression. What other options did I have? I could say it was a hunch, that I didn't want to risk the consequences of my active skill. But that would sound like an excuse, and it might not sit well with them. Or I could tell them I wanted to forge a different path from the family's tradition, but that would likely be viewed as defiance, given that our family valued tradition above all else. As I pondered my response, I realized that there might not be a satisfactory answer that would appease the family. The decision I had made during my year of training was a personal one, and I had to stand by it, regardless of the consequences. With a calm and steady voice, I responded to the patriarch's question. I just felt like it. The room fell into a momentary silence as my simple answer hung in the air. It was a response that didn't offer any explanations or justifications. I knew it wouldn't satisfy their curiosity or concerns, but it was the truth. During my year of training, I had followed my instincts and made a choice that felt right. Their voices rose in revolt. He's making a mockery of us, one family elder exclaimed, his voice filled with outrage. Unbelievable. After all the resources we've invested in his training, another muttered in frustration. The voices of dissent grew louder, and some even shouted at the patriarch to take appropriate action. He should be cast out, one cried out, echoing the sentiment of many in the room. Meanwhile, the patriarch, Lord Kazuhiko, remained stoic in his seat, his expression unreadable. It was clear that he had made his decision the moment my information was revealed. But before any further action could be taken, I could feel the flames of the status activation process enveloping me, preparing to grant me my own active skill. Stop the ceremony. We can't allow this forsaker to receive the blessing of God, one desperate voice cried out. The sight of me receiving this privilege brought further frustration and anger among those present, as they believed that I did not deserve to gain a skill. However, it was too late. The ceremony had already begun, and the holographic window above me displayed the icon of my newly acquired active skill, along with its name, for everyone present to see. The icon and name of my skill hung in the air, casting an eerie glow over the room, and the voices of protest gradually faded into silence as they tried to make sense of the name of the displayed skill. Self-immolation. Self-immolation, it was a name that left everyone puzzled, their anger and frustration momentarily forgotten as they exchanged confused glances. "What does that even mean?" someone whispered. The uncertainty in the room was palpable, as no one could comprehend the implications of a skill with such an enigmatic name. Finally, it was the patriarch, Lord Kazuhiko, who broke the silence. He spoke with an authoritative tone, his gaze fixed on me. "Kyan, demonstrate your skill." What a sense of déjà vu. I couldn't help but recall a similar situation from my past life when he had asked me to demonstrate my skill. Back then, it had been mere curiosity that had driven him, and his interest had waned as he watched me burn away at my own life without much concern. But this time, there was something different in his demeanor. His request for a demonstration held an added layer of significance. For the patriarch, usefulness was paramount, and if my skill proved to be advantageous to the family, he might overlook my deviation from the Arashi path. After all, what mattered most to him were the tools at his disposal, even if those tools acted in their own self-interest. Apologies for shattering your expectations, patriarch, but there's one critical difference between this turn and the last. This time, I'm going to make it through alive. While your disappointment will remain. Self-immolation. The moment I activated self-immolation, it was as if my entire world had been set ablaze. Flames engulfed my body, searing through my flesh, devouring my bones, and consuming every inch of my being. My clothes were reduced to ashes, leaving me naked and vulnerable amidst the inferno. Agony beyond words coursed through me, and my screams of pain echoed in the room. The onlookers, including the patriarch and the family members, were in shock as they witnessed the horrifying spectacle. Their eyes widened in disbelief, unable to comprehend the situation. Amidst the inferno that raged around me, I bore the excruciating pain with a twisted smile that could be seen beneath the flames that ate at me. Why was I smiling? It was a simple answer. I was still standing, defying the fate that had befallen me in my previous life. In my past, a single second of using self-immolation had left me disabled for life. But this time, I endured, counting each agonizing second as it passed, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. I was still alive, still able to move, and it was all thanks to enduring vitality. Kyan. Amidst the roaring flames, the horrified scream of my mother pierced the air. She cried out in a voice filled with equal parts terror and pity. Tears welled up in her eyes as she watched her son being burned alive. With a grim determination, I summoned every ounce of my willpower and focused on deactivating the skill. Slowly, the flames began to dissipate from my body, leaving behind a cloud of smoke and a charred, scorched form. As the smoke cleared, the extent of the damage became apparent. My body was badly burnt and disfigured, but the glimmer of hope that I forged myself was not lost to me. My passive skill, enduring vitality, continued its work, gradually healing the wounds inflicted by the flames. "He's cursed," one exclaimed, his voice trembling with fear. The family members present, initially stunned into silence, began to voice their thoughts. "This is punishment," another declared, his tone filled with condemnation. "He's forsaken God. He's given a cursed skill because of it," a third shouted. The patriarch, Lord Kazuhiko, finally spoke, his voice calm and unwavering amidst the chaos. "Enough." His single word silenced the room, and all eyes turned to him once more. "Cursed child," he began, his tone filled with a heavy sense of judgment. "Cursed child. Why am I not surprised? You have deviated from our path, forsaken tradition, and incurred a cursed skill from the divine." Lord Kazuhiko continued, his voice unwavering but filled with a sense of finality. "We cannot allow an individual who has defied the family to remain under its protection. Kyan Arashi, as of today, you are stripped of any and all ties to the Arashi family. You shall never present yourself as an Arashi again." The patriarch's declaration hung heavy in the air, casting a solemn shadow over the room. His words were like a final verdict, sealing my fate. I had anticipated consequences for my deviation, but this was more than I had expected, thought not one I had not envisioned happening. As the realization of my excommunication from the Arashi family settled in, there was a single set of reaction among the family members. Nods of agreement, believing it was the right course of action to uphold tradition. Only two people within the crowd could be seen with torn glances, Elora and my mother. My mother wept openly, her heartbroken sobs echoing through the hall. She reached out to me, as if trying to hold on to the last vestiges of our connection, but she was stopped by a few family members who formed a barrier between us. It was a heavy price to pay for choosing a different path, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was worth it. But even as I faced this harsh reality, I felt a strange sense of liberation. "The ceremony has not yet concluded. Escort him out, and let us continue where we left off," declared the patriarch with unwavering authority. With those words from the patriarch, my fate was sealed. I was escorted out of the family residence, my body still smoldering, battered and naked. The flames had tested me, and I had endured for the first time. Now, I was forced to forge my own destiny, away from the Arashi family's guidance. Chapter 10: 4 Factions and the Tower. Heavy. Ho! Thud. Clap, clap, clap. Their hands smacked together as if dusting off the remnants of my presence. Huff, good riddance. Don't ever think of coming here again, you blasphemer. Creak, creak, the sound of the gate's door closing behind me echoed with finality, sealing my fate. Hey! Could I at least get some pants? I shouted in frustration, my voice echoing down the empty exterior. Ha dot. I couldn't help but let out a weary sigh. Thrown out of the Arashi family residence like discarded drunkard, I found myself laying on the ground of the entrance gates to the residence, naked and without a single possession to my name. The attendants who had escorted me here had shown no care for my well-being, treating me as if I were nothing more than a nuisance to be disposed of. As I stood there, naked, the absurdity of my situation suddenly hit me. Ha, 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 ha. I couldn't help but let out a chuckle at the sheer absurdity of it all. I must have looked like a complete lunatic, standing there in my birthday suit in broad daylight. Ha 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 ha, what now? Creak, creak. Just as I was contemplating my next move, the gate to the Arashi family residence creaked open. I turned to see who it was. To my surprise, it was Elora, my loyal maiden, running toward me with a leather bag in her hand. "Young master," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with concern. "Elora," I replied with relief. "What were you thinking?" Her voice trembling with concern. Her question hung in the air, and I couldn't blame her for her reaction. The events of the day had been nothing short of a dramatic spectacle. From my sudden appearance before the family, physically transformed by a different training path, to the shocking revelation of my stats and the acquisition of what they considered a cursed skill from an angered deity, every moment had been filled with tension and the unexpected. As she gazed at me, the first thing she needed to know was the reasoning behind it all. "Elora, let it be. Regardless of the reasons, the consequences have already unfolded. Young master. Here." Elora pushed the leather bag she was holding into my bared chest. "It's from your mother. She asked me to hurry and bring you some clothes and money." Elora explained. "Mother did?" I responded in surprise, wondering why she would bother after what had transpired. "Is she all right?" My concern for my mother growing as I realized the consequences of my actions. Elora sighed softly, her voice tinged with worry. "After you were thrown out of the residence, your mother begged your fath, the patriarch, to reconsider his decision. But he wouldn't listen and was quite adamant. She even tried to leave the premises, but she was stopped. Young master, she feels responsible for the entire situation." "Nonsense!" I shouted, cutting her off. In the end, I promised myself that I would make Mother happy this time around. But still, even in this second chance, I've only brought worry to her, just like back then. I paused for a moment, reflecting on my choices. But what choice did I have? I had to go through this process, else the same scenario would have unfolded once again. No. Things are different now. I'm alive and well, standing when I couldn't. I can still change my destiny and that of my mother's. I looked at Elora with a resolute expression. Thank you for bringing me the bag, Elora. I appreciate it. Please, tell this to Mother. In that moment, clarity washed over me, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. I looked at Elora with unwavering determination. None of this is your fault, but my own. Wait for me. I will grow strong, so strong that even the family won't be able to handle the consequences of it. So, please, wait for me. All I ask of you is to be patient. Elora nodded with tears in her eyes. With a final nod of determination, I turned away from the Arashi family residence, leaving behind my past and setting out on a new path. Light, I remarked, feeling the weight of the bag Elora had handed to me. As I opened the bag, I was greeted by several neatly folded sets of clothes. I quickly changed into one of them, feeling a bit more like myself. Hidden within the layers of fabric, I discovered an assortment of bronze and silver coins. It wasn't a large amount, but it was enough to cover my basic needs for the time being. The most important item, however, was a map, lying neatly folded at the bottom of the bag. My life had always been confined within the secure, high walls of the Arashi residence. I never had the opportunity to step outside, especially due to my health condition, which always demanded careful attention. The map was comprehensive, covering the immediate and distant regions around the Arashi residence. In the upper left corner, the map showed the region of the Dwarven faction. Their territory was nestled against the rugged face of a towering mountain range, rich with ores and abundant mineral resources. This proximity to the mountains not only provided them with precious metals for their renowned craftsmanship, but also offered a natural fortress, securing their place in the world. To the upper right corner was the domain of the Elf faction, an expanse of lush forests and rich herb gardens. Their lands were hidden behind the veil of the Lost Forest, a vast and seemingly endless woodland that trapped travelers in its deceptive calm, making it impossible for the unguided to reach the elven homelands. It was a natural barrier that protected the secrets and sanctity of the elfin race. The Beastmen faction's territory, as depicted in the bottom right corner of the map, was a blend of sparse forests and expansive sandy areas. It was a land where greenery was limited but life thrived, especially around the oceans that punctuated the otherwise arid landscape. The forests that did exist were not dense but open woodlands, which allowed for ample sunlight and a different ecosystem to flourish compared to the thick forests of the elven lands. Lastly, the bottom left corner held the human faction, an area characterized by its bustling cities and sprawling trade routes, reflecting the humans' adaptability and their penchant for commerce and connection. The roads on the map were clearly drawn, showing how they moved across the land and met at different places. All these roads came together to form one main path that was easy to see. This path went straight to the tower. The tower's origins were shrouded in mystery, its colossal form standing as an enigma at the crossroads of the four great regions. No records existed of its construction, and none could say why it came to be, but it was an ageless monument, its history lost. Long before the tower emerged, the world was engulfed in chaos, with each faction waging relentless war upon the others, coveting the rich resources and territories that their neighbors held. They were driven by the belief that total control over the world was within grasp, a romanticized notion that fueled endless conflict. However, the appearance of the tower at the center of the world brought an abrupt halt to the bloodshed. As the factions independently explored the tower's depths, they discovered that it contained power beyond their wildest imaginations, a force potent enough to upset the delicate balance of power that had defined their coexistence. Realizing the tower's potential to bestow immense power was too great for any one faction to possess. Thus, a peace pact was forged, one that would last until someone could conquer the tower's final floor and unveil its ultimate secret. As years turned into decades, and decades into centuries, the tower remained unconquered. Many ventured into its depths, mighty adventurers, ambitious leaders, and powerful warriors alike. Yet, the tower claimed them all. Its floors were filled with monstrous creatures, deadly traps, and labyrinthine puzzles. But amidst these dangers, there lay treasures of untold value and powers that one could only dream of. Thus, the tower became the center of the world in more than just a geographical sense. I stood there, gazing at the image of the tower on the map. I knew, deep in my bones, that my path was leading me there. In the end, the only way for me to gain the strength and power to fight my destiny was to delve into the depths of the tower. It was the proving ground for all who sought to rise above their born station, a place where one could either find greatness or meet their doom. As I continued to stare at the tower's image, a thought struck me. The Arashi family was one born and risen from prominence because of that very tower. The founder, according to the tales told through the generations, had ventured deeper into the tower, reaching a depth that many had considered unreachable. It was there that he encountered the deity that the family now worships. The story said he fought a battle of such epic proportions that the very walls of the tower itself shook. And when the dust settled, he emerged victorious, gaining the rare and powerful pyromancer class. Every Arashi since then, including myself, inherited this class, the flame of the dragon burning within our very souls. I couldn't help but wonder, was this so-called blessing actually a gift from the dragon, a reward for my ancestors' strength and valor? Or was it a curse, a spiteful brand from a deity angered at being defeated? This legacy had always been a source of pride for the Arashi, a symbol of our might and our divine right to rule. But now, I pondered the true nature of this inheritance. But I understood all too well that the Arashi were not unique in their encounter with a deity within the tower. Many clans and estates boasted similar tales of ascension through the tower's trials. It was said that the amount of divine beings within the tower's walls was as vast as the stars in the night sky, each deity offering power unfathomable to those who earned their favor. Unique classes, legendary items, skills of immense potency, such were the numerous rewards for those brave or fortunate enough to meet with these divine beings. Some families built their entire lineage around such blessings, their names synonymous with the powers they had been granted. I couldn't help but wonder about the countless adventurers who had been lured by these tales, each seeking their own form of greatness within the towers only to end up dying. I gazed upon the path that would lead me to the tower. In a moment of introspection, I mused silently. Was I any different from the rest?